Is Medieval 2 the perfect Total War game? Or is it actually trash? If one game has defined the entirety of the Total War series, it has to come down to none other than Medieval 2. Releasing in November 2006, Medieval 2 assumed the throne left by Rome, another massive gem. Medieval 2 both built on the excellent foundations of Rome, but introduced entirely new mechanics itself. And together, they made for the Total War game I could not get enough of, despite a few flaws here and there. If you're like me and absolutely love this game, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video, because this is personal. If you ask any fan of strategy games what their favorite time period is, you'll likely get a majority saying the Middle Ages. And it's not weird really. The Middle Ages is all over media, and is the epicenter of conflicts and state formations that still impact us today. We're talking an age of awesome knights and castles, kings and princesses, new empires and old, the all-importance of religion and conflicts based on them, and much more. Medieval 2 encompasses all of this, at least to some degree, while of course keeping to the Total War formula. And that leads us to the first thing that meets us in this beautiful game, the main menu. My god, I spent a lot of time looking at this thing, and not just for the bold and dark color palette. Total War used to do this thing where the main menu was animated, with soldiers marching forever towards war or into heaven, none of them recognizable by face, and yet all of them a part of a larger whole. What made it perfect was the soundtrack, a mix of two actually, which set the mood for the entire experience, and you can tell just how much I love this by the fact that I'm spending time talking about the literal main menu here. Medieval 2, like in a lot of aspects, follows in the footsteps of Rome. In the beginning, we have a mere 5 available playable factions here, but they're likely the ones players will want to begin with anyway, at least perhaps the European players, which this game was obviously targeted at first and foremost. Honestly, I don't know which faction of these 5 I like the most, but I know my most played is the Holy Roman Empire, and for a very simple reason.
Ja, mein Kaiser!
Greetings, Kaiser.
Mein Kaiser.
Ja, Kaiser. Mein Kaiser?
Medieval 2's foundations are recognizable even now, almost exactly 16 years later. You move armies around the map and have cities dotting it. But there are a few key differences here, namely the systems of the Total Wars of old, before the days of Rome 2, of which Medieval 2 certainly is a part. The campaign map is your playground in Medieval 2, and somehow, even though this is a game from 2006, I still find it beautiful to look at. I can't really put my finger on it, but there is something about the Total War maps that predate Rome 2 that just seems clearer and more readable to me. Don't get me wrong, I love the map itself in Rome 2, but with Medieval 2 for example, there's something about the colors, about the overview, about the lack of certain effects or flickering, that is just much easier to look at. Even though the map is rather small for today's standards, it continues to be densely populated with cities and hotspots, and I love the innovation of trade goods which you can actually use by placing merchant agents on them. The trade carts and ships further make this map so good to look at, and I would never want to be without the sense of life this brings to the experience. It all crescendos with the inclusion of the beautiful soundtrack, and I maintain that Medieval 2 offers the best music in the entire series, even to this day. I still believe the Medieval 2 map is timeless, and even though mods have made this map so much more beautiful and detailed, I still just love this basic version. What's especially awesome here is how Medieval 2 deals with scope. The game takes place between 1080 and 1530, a decent chunk of time. For the vast majority of the game, Europe, North Africa, and the Near East is everything we know, and it's the focus of the game. But much later in the game, something quite incredible happens. America is discovered, and we suddenly have an entire new theater of war to fight over. It's magically hidden at the very edge of the original map, and even though the Americas is certainly underdeveloped design-wise, I love this feature for its sheer existence. A lot happens during this campaign to make it so much more dynamic than many other Total Wars out there, however. Massive events like the Mongol invasion, the Black Plague, and the invention of gunpowder turns the Medieval 2 campaign on its head by not only introducing new threats, but also ways of dealing with them. The cities of Medieval 2 is where everything happens. Not only is it where you tax your population on a city-by-city basis, but every city has the ability to raise virtually every building in the game. This means there's no province system, no province capital and smaller villages. Instead, every city has the potential to be tiny villages and massive metropolises, building roads, farms, markets, churches, and ports to facilitate growth and public order. Because of this decentralized and granular system, I prefer it so much more to the province system with restrictive building slots, as Medieval 2 continues to provide me that sense of roleplay on a strategic scale. Having actual population numbers aids this feeling further, and the various menus provides even more insight into how your cities and towns are doing. Religion is of course an important part of the Middle Ages, and Medieval 2 is no exception. Every faction belongs to a religion, but contrary to Rome's barbarian invasion or Total War Attila, there's no internal conversion here. Every character belongs to either Catholicism, Orthodoxy, Islam, paganism, or they're simply heretics. Characters cannot convert unless they're priests and become heretical, but they do have a piety mechanic which essentially tells you how religious they are. On the other hand, cities can be converted. They're done so through either religious buildings of other faiths, or through missions by priests and imams. Since religion is directly tied to public order, it's vital to make good use of religious agents. What's more though, is that Medieval 2 offers arguably the most powerful war mechanic in all of Total War, Crusades and jihads, and this ties into the Pope mechanic. It's actually kinda funny, because when you look into it, the papal and cardinal system of Medieval 2 is almost a shot-for-shot copy-paste of the Senate system in Rome. Here, a select group of high piety priests are made cardinals. This means that any Catholic country with good enough priests may house a cardinal. This is important because having cardinals and being faithful Christians, i.e. listening to the Pope and building churches, gives you cross points. The more crosses, the more the Pope likes you, and the less likely you are of being excommunicated by the Pope. Seeing as the Pope comes from one of the Catholic countries, being at war with said country will have the Pope hate you and vice versa, so there's definitely politics and stake involved here. But when the Pope dies, one of the cardinals has a chance of becoming the new Pope after a vote. That gives you a chance to take revenge and get back into the good graces of His Holiness. The Pope is never directly controlled by you though, but your crosses do let you influence him. With enough of them, you can ask the Pope to call a crusade against one of the many eligible cities around the world. And it's not just Jerusalem either, but any city deemed valid, be it a Muslim or excommunicated Christian one, might be granted. The Crusade is a massively important event in Medieval 2, as it calls on every Catholic nation to take up the cross and advance on the target city and faction. Every general with at least 8 units may join the Crusade, giving them a large boost to movement points, powerful traits, and allows them to recruit special Crusader mercenaries to pad their armies further. Importantly, the army does not cost any gold in upkeep, but the units might desert if you're not making enough progress towards a Crusade target every turn. But the best thing about the Crusade is of course the event video, which is just nothing short of legendary.
The Holy Bible may preach peace, but when it is Christendom itself that is threatened, then it is every Christian's duty to defend all that is holy. His Holiness the Pope has called a crusade to reclaim the Holy Lands from the infidel, who would deny Christian pilgrims their right to visit the holy places. It is time for the armies of Christendom to put aside their differences and unite under one banner, the sign of the cross, and give back God's children what is rightfully theirs, or die trying.
Catholic nations aren't the only ones with religious war fun times though, as Muslims have the jihad. There is no Pope in Islam, but every Muslim nation with a powerful enough imam may call a jihad on an infidel city. And it works the same way as the Crusades once called. Even though I love playing as Byzantium, it's kinda sad that they have no way of joining in on the fun. But then again, the Byzantines don't really need all that to have fun. As we know, there just is no party like a Byzantine party, because the Byzantine party don't stop. And that's mostly because the campaign is one long struggle to retake the empire both in the east and the west. Medieval 2 enhances your campaigns further by adding missions and guilds. Missions might be given to you by a council of nobles to conquer a foreign city or initiate diplomatic relations with another faction, and will in turn send you gold if you've done well. The Pope might also ask you to build churches or stop warring against another faction to keep the peace between Catholics. One of my personal favorite features though, is the guild system. Medieval 2 has a system where guilds, belonging to one aspect of society, will offer their services to you. For example, a merchant guild might offer to establish a guild in a city focusing on economics and trade. A thieves guild might do the same in a place where you've recruited many spy or assassin agents. And my personal favorite, either the Knights Templar, Hospitaller, Santiago, or Teutonic Knights may found an order in your cities, letting you recruit their knights. If you continue to invest into particular fields, they may offer to upgrade this guild. And even though there may be several small or medium-sized guilds out there can only be one guild headquarters per guild in the entire world. And I love the race towards achieving that. The Medieval 2 campaign is not without its faults, of course. The AI is unpredictable at best, with certain factions like Milan hard-coded to be absolute backstabbers, and Portugal often showing up as invaders in Ireland. Other than for trade rights or map information, you never want to rely on the AI too much either. In terms of historical accuracy, Medieval 2 is quite a massive sinner. Here we have factions like a fully centralized Holy Roman Empire, a Spain, and the egregious lack of Norway even though it's on the map. And this follows again in the footsteps of Rome, where a certain present or modern take on this medieval world simplifies the history. Ideally, all of this would be fixed in a Medieval 3, where our faction diversity and depth would pay this time period the complexity and attention to detail it deserves. I'd also like to see a much more intricate religious system, an actual feudal system portraying the massive amounts of vassals under more or less powerful kings and emperors, formable nations, a return to the individual city system and away from unimmersive provinces, and government systems that actually make it a vastly different experience to play as Catholics, Orthodox, Muslims, or even pagans. But the one place where Medieval 2 still excels like arguably no other is in its battles. How Creative Assembly managed to create its best system ever and never truly replicate it, I don't know. The Medieval 2 battles just feel amazing, and it comes down to a handful of points. Medieval 2 battles looked amazing for its time. Each unit was now individually modeled amongst a handful, making Rome Total War look positively ancient in comparison. But while age has dulled the visual somewhat, the game still feels great. Units really look like they are fighting each other, mixing between generic animations and scripted killing blows, making for battle scenes perhaps only matched by Shogun 2. These visuals and the sense of progression was further enhanced by the fact that what happened on the campaign so clearly influenced the units on the battlefield. Not only can units level up, but we can upgrade their arms and armor, and these upgrades have an actual visual change on the battlefield. This is actually insane and such a beautiful detail, and again, has never been re-implemented in a Total War game since. A massive shame to say the least, although perhaps not as relevant in later time periods. Further, Medieval 2's battle maps somehow felt so organic and realistic. The locations you fought reflected those on the campaign map, an inclusion of two different types of siege battles, be it cities, which were much easier to siege, or actual castles, which would come to house not only one but two inner walls, were absolute nightmares to attack. These of course were different on the campaign as well. So cities were economic powerhouses, while castles were warlike bastions. It was all fun as heck, and actually demanded more of you since taking a castle meant fighting a tough-as-nails battle. Siege battles were made so much better than in Rome, by the way, partially due to better pathfinding, but also because, again, things just felt better. Units fired from the walls, those massive trebuchets tossed fiery rocks like no other, and due to the technological developments, what began as impenetrable citadels developed over time into something we can overcome due to the sheer power of the almighty cannon. I mean, heck, Medieval 2 has us begin with peasant armies, but end with heavily armored knights and even musket-carrying gunners, symbolizing how dynamic and all-encompassing the time period between 1080 and 1530 really was. I also appreciate the difference in units per faction. Now you'll obviously see many of the same units all over Western Europe, for example, focusing on knights and the like, but we have important differences. England will sport the best longbowmen, France and the Holy Roman Empire offer the best knights, and in the east, Egypt, the Turks, and the Mongols deliver some impressive light and archer cavalry units, making for a diverse battlefield as long as you focus on your strengths. Something I personally miss a lot in the latest Total War games, by the way, are the individual unit abilities. I loved having my spearmen assume different formations and have archers put down spikes, and I just have no idea why this has been removed. A game where it could be extremely useful is in Troy, where heavy spearmen could make excellent use of such abilities. But alas, Medieval 2's battles have so many strengths then, despite its age, and Creative Assembly desperately needs to take a good hard look at itself to re-implement some or all of its features. Medieval 2 continues to be in my personal top 3 Total War games of all time because of its fine wine aging. Rome has not aged nearly as well, and after its launch, so many games were either buggy or limited in scope. But Medieval 2 struck a near-perfect balance between it all, and the sheer amount of mods out there, which greatly enhances the game in every way by the way, shows just how much this game was loved and how much room there was for modding. A lot of people today hate on Medieval 2's vanilla game, but you know, I replayed it for this video. and I have to say it was as fun as ever. One of my campaigns was as England. I began by establishing a foothold on the home islands, while I also went for Brittany. France wanted to beef, but of course I fought them back, and soon we talked peace again. But not before a Grand Crusade was called, and I headed for Jerusalem to reconquer the Holy Land. It reminded me of just how great this game still plays, how the lighting complements the battlefield time and time again, and that feeling of expanding your cities, going from seeing little trade to a whole lot of tiny ships and carts, continues to be a magical feeling. I will say again that the AI is kinda weird. Scotland, for example, just had an entire army by York for like 100 turns.
Back off before I take a liking to your lands and daughters.
And compared to the later games, the turn times really fly by, but it still delivers that wonderful experience, albeit in a smaller format than we might be used to today. Medieval 2 was enhanced with the Kingdoms expansion, a perfect addition I've covered before in 2 other videos, most notably for iPad. Both Medieval 2 and Kingdoms are now released on handheld devices, by the way, so if you feel like you want the full Total War experience on the go, then Medieval 2 offers this as well, even with enhanced UI capabilities and the ability to now actually survey your cities on the battle map in peacetime. In hindsight, Medieval 2 might not have been objectively perfect before its time, and for a history-obsessed teen, it really was. And if we ever get a Medieval 3, I pray that CA really takes everything the fans love from this game, understand what they did so well, and try to recreate that feeling. Amen.